top secret witness hidden from the world.
He did not disappear by accident. His erasure was deliberate, precise, and absolute. One day, his name still existed in government databases, legal files, and digital records. The next, it was as if he had never been born. Birth certificates vanished. Employment histories returned errors. Surveillance footage glitched at the exact moments he appeared. Even hospital records showed blank spaces where his identity once lived. To the public, he was declared missing, later presumed dead. A closed case. No questions asked. But behind sealed corridors and classified systems, his existence was carefully rewritten. Files were stamped redacted. Access required clearance levels few possessed. His real name was replaced with a number, then later with nothing at all. Even the agents assigned to protect him were forbidden from knowing who he truly was. This was not just about hiding a man. It was about removing his past so completely that no one could trace him, threaten him, or use him as leverage. Family ties were cut. Friends were told lies. Anyone who searched for him found silence. Over time, people stopped asking. For him, the loss was deeper than physical isolation. Without a name, without proof of existence, he felt himself fading. Identity is more than documents. It is memory, connection, and recognition. Stripped of all three, he lived like a shadow, present but unacknowledged. Yet this erasure served a purpose. What he had seen could destroy powerful structures built on secrecy. As long as he remained invisible, the truth remained contained. His life became the price paid for stability, control, and denial. He understood one thing clearly. If the world remembered who he was, it would mean the secret had already escaped and his safety would be gone. Being erased kept him alive, but it also trapped him in a life where survival came at the cost of identity. What made him valuable was not who he was, but what he knew. He had been in the wrong place at the wrong time, witnessing something that was never meant to be seen. It wasn't a rumor, a theory, or secondhand information. He saw it with his own eyes, heard the voices, recognized the faces, remembered the exact words spoken in confidence, believing no outsider would ever survive long enough to repeat them. The event itself was brief, almost ordinary on the surface. No explosions, no chaos. Just a closed-door meeting, a quiet exchange, and a decision that would affect thousands, maybe millions of lives. What made it dangerous was not the act, but the people involved. Powerful figures whose authority depended on the public never learning the truth. At first, he didn't understand the weight of what he had witnessed. Only later did the pieces connect. News headlines began to echo what he already knew. Official statements contradicted reality. Investigations stalled. Evidence disappeared. That was when fear set in. He realized his memory alone was a weapon. Documents could be destroyed. Digital files could be altered. But his testimony, clear, detailed, and human, was something they could not erase so easily. That made him both priceless and disposable. Those who controlled the secret understood this too. To them, he was a liability walking on two legs. Not because he wanted to speak, but because he could. Every detail he remembered increased the risk. Dates, locations, faces, decisions made without signatures. Even silence was dangerous now. Simply knowing the truth made him a threat. This knowledge changed how he slept, how he breathed, how he trusted. He replayed the moment again and again, wondering if witnessing it had already sealed his fate. The truth lived inside him, heavy and unspoken. And as long as it remained there, hidden but intact, the world stayed balanced on a fragile lie, one sentence away from collapse. Hiding was no longer a phase. It was his existence. There was no single safe house, only a chain of temporary shelters that changed without warning. Remote apartments, windowless rooms, isolated buildings on forgotten roads. Each place was chosen for anonymity, not comfort. Furniture was minimal. Walls were bare. Nothing personal was allowed, because nothing personal could be taken. Every move followed strict rules. Travel happened at odd hours. Routes were altered mid-journey. Faces of the guards changed, but their silence never did. They spoke in codes, avoided names, and never answered questions. He learned quickly that curiosity was a liability. Communication with the outside world was forbidden. No phone calls. No internet. No news. Time lost its structure without reference points. Days blended together, marked only by routine security checks and meals delivered without conversation. The isolation weighed heavier than fear. He began to understand that protection and imprisonment often look the same from the inside. The doors were locked for his safety, they said. The windows were covered for his protection. But protection offered no warmth, no reassurance, only distance. Sleep came in fragments. Every unfamiliar sound triggered alertness. A knock could mean relocation or elimination. Trust was fragile, built on necessity rather than belief. The most dangerous moments were the quiet ones. With nothing to distract him, his thoughts turned inward. He replayed the past, imagined the future, questioned whether silence truly kept anyone safe. The world outside continued moving, unaware that its stability rested on a hidden man living without a life. He existed in between, alive, yet removed from society. Present, yet unseen. Hiding kept his body safe. But with each passing day, it stripped away pieces of his humanity. And deep inside, a question began to grow louder than the fear. How long could a man stay hidden before disappearing completely? The real battle was not outside the safe house. It was inside him. At first, silence felt like a rational choice. Staying quiet meant staying alive. The system that erased him also protected him, thinly, reluctantly, but enough to keep his heart beating. He told himself that survival was not cowardice, it was logic. But logic did not quiet the weight in his chest. Every day and hiding gave him time to think. Time to remember faces affected by the decision he had witnessed. Time to hear news fragments when guards slipped, stories that didn't match the truth he knew. Each lie repeated publicly felt personal, as if the world was being trained to forget something he was forced to remember forever. He asked himself the same question again and again. Was his silence protecting order or protecting the guilty? Speaking out would not just risk his life. It could end the fragile balance keeping chaos away. He had seen how quickly systems reacted when threatened, how efficiently they erased problems. If he talked, he might disappear completely, with no one left to tell the story. Yet silence carried its own cost. He began to feel complicit. Each day he stayed hidden, the truth remained buried, and injustice became permanent. His survival started to feel borrowed, extended at the expense of others who would never know why their lives changed. Fear argued for caution. Conscience argued for responsibility. At night, when the guards were quiet and the walls felt closer, he imagined stepping forward, speaking clearly, naming what he had seen. The image terrified him, but it also brought relief. Because in that moment, he was no longer hiding. He realized something painful and undeniable. Living without truth was slowly destroying him in ways danger never could. Sooner or later, he would have to choose. Remain alive and invisible or speak and accept whatever followed. The first sign was subtle, almost easy to dismiss. A relocation happened too quickly, without explanation. Guards avoided eye contact. Security checks doubled overnight. The routines he had memorized for months suddenly changed, and no one told him why. Silence, once controlled, became tense. Then came the mistakes. A vehicle arrived late. A coded phrase was repeated incorrectly. Once, a guard used his real name, just once, but it was enough to confirm his fear. Information was leaking. Somewhere, someone knew more than they should. He understood how fragile secrecy truly was. It only took one compromised file, one intercepted message, one person with divided loyalty. The same system that had erased him could fail him just as quietly. The air inside the safe houses felt heavier now. Protection no longer felt absolute, it felt temporary. He began to sense that he was no longer being hidden, but hunted. Sleep became impossible. Every sound carried meaning. Footsteps outside his door made his pulse race. Even the guards seemed alert in a different way, as if they were bracing for impact rather than preventing it. He noticed something else too, urgency. Conversations ended abruptly when he entered rooms. Phone calls stopped mid-sentence. The people assigned to keep him alive were no longer planning months ahead, they were reacting day by day. That was when he realized the truth. He was no longer the only one who understood the value of his testimony. Others wanted it too, some to expose the secret, others to bury it forever. And between those opposing forces, he was the weakest point. Hiding had kept him safe when he was unknown. But now that his existence was being whispered again, invisibility was no longer protection. The opportunity arrived quietly, almost unexpectedly. A single message, a coded invitation, slipped through the rigid layers of his isolation. It offered him a chance to testify, to bring the hidden truth into the light. One chance. One moment. One choice that could change everything. He stared at the message for hours, as if reading it aloud could somehow make the decision easier. His mind raced through the possibilities: speak and risk everything, or remain silent and live another day in hiding. Each path carried consequences heavier than any physical threat he had endured. Speaking out meant more than exposing a secret. It meant stepping into a world he had been removed from: faces, names, systems, and people that no longer knew he existed. It meant taking responsibility for the weight of the knowledge he had carried alone for so long. One wrong word could cost lives, destroy institutions, or erase him permanently. Yet staying silent carried its own unbearable burden. The memory of injustice, the weight of complicity, and the quiet screams of the truth he had seen echoed louder with every passing day. He could no longer ignore the moral cost of survival without action. He walked through empty corridors of the safe house, rehearsing conversations no one would hear. He imagined the faces of those affected by the events he had witnessed. He thought of the people who had suffered while the secret remained buried. Each scenario sharpened the stakes, forcing clarity from chaos. Finally, he realized that the choice was not just about survival, it was about courage. It was about reclaiming identity, reclaiming voice, and reclaiming the fragments of humanity stripped away by years of hiding. The critical moment had arrived. He could no longer linger in shadows. Either he would speak, and the world would hear his truth, or he would remain silent, and the truth might die with him. When the moment came, the world shifted. He stepped forward, finally leaving the shadows that had defined him for so long. His voice, once silenced, once erased, carried the weight of years spent watching, remembering, and fearing. Every word was deliberate, every detail unflinching. He named dates, places, decisions, and faces. The secret, carefully buried for so long, spilled into reality. At first, there was disbelief. Officials denied it. Headlines ignored it. Whispers of conspiracy filled the air. But the evidence he provided was undeniable. Digital traces, corroborating accounts, and the clarity of his memory left no room for doubt. Slowly, the world began to wake to the truth he had carried alone. The impact was immediate and profound. Those in power scrambled to contain the fallout. Lives were disrupted. Careers ended. Institutions shook to their foundations. People who had thought themselves untouchable were forced to answer questions they had never expected. Yet for him, the consequences were deeply personal. Survival was no longer guaranteed. The very people who had once erased him now sought to silence him again, but this time, they faced a witness who had nothing left to lose. He had already reclaimed his identity by speaking. The world might try to forget, but he had already left his mark. He also learned that truth is a double-edged sword. Justice often comes slowly, imperfectly, and sometimes at a cost too high to measure. But even as chaos unfolded, he felt an unfamiliar relief, the heavy burden of knowledge finally shared. In the end, the hidden witness was no longer invisible. His life, once defined by fear and silence, became a testament to courage, persistence, and the power of truth. The world would never forget what he revealed. And he, for the first time, could stop hiding from it.